Amid the endless expanse of white, the footprints appeared like a sudden punctuation in the monotony, breaking the uniformity of snow that stretched in every direction. For days, his eyes had scanned the frozen landscape for anything familiar, any sign that progress was being made or that survival was within reach, but the mountain offered nothing but ice, wind, and silence. Then there it was, a set of tracks, partially covered by drifting snow, yet unmistakable. They were deliberate, purposeful, and undeniably not his own. In that moment, the mountain, which had seemed indifferent and merciless, revealed a whisper of life, a hint that the barren world around him was not entirely empty. The discovery was disorienting at first. He stared at the footprints, trying to comprehend what they meant. Were they left by another climber, someone who had survived the treacherous path ahead? Or perhaps by an animal, wandering with instincts honed for survival in this unforgiving environment? Each possibility carried its own weight, and each one sparked a flurry of thoughts and emotions. The footprints were more than marks in the snow. They were proof that movement, presence, and survival were still possible even in this frozen wasteland. For hours he circled the tracks, examining every detail, the spacing, the depth, the direction. His mind raced, considering the implications. The snow, once a uniform, intimidating blanket, now became a map filled with meaning. Every ridge, every drift, every shadow of a print suggested a story he could not fully know, but a story that mattered to him nonetheless. The simple act of noticing, of seeing something that indicated life or movement beyond his own struggle, brought a flood of relief. It reminded him that he was not navigating the mountain in vain, that there were paths and possibilities he had yet to encounter. The footprints awakened a sense of curiosity that had lain dormant under exhaustion and despair. For days his focus had been entirely on survival: move, rest, eat, conserve energy. Now, the tracks offered an additional purpose, a reason to observe, interpret, and follow. His mind, which had been clouded by fatigue, fear, and isolation, sharpened with attention. Each step forward was no longer merely an act of endurance, but a response to a tangible clue in the landscape. The snow, once intimidating in its vast emptiness, now held guidance, offering a subtle but profound reminder that even in the harshest conditions, signs of life and hope could appear when least expected. In that moment, the footprints became more than physical impressions. They were a symbol. They represented continuity, evidence that movement and survival were possible, and that the mountain, despite its severity, could provide direction. The frozen ground had spoken, and he had listened. The discovery reawakened a sense of purpose, a fragile but persistent spark that would carry him forward through exhaustion, cold, and isolation. The mountain remained formidable and indifferent, but for the first time in days, he felt a renewed connection to the world, a reminder that life leaves traces, and noticing them can transform despair into determination. The footprints in the snow did more than catch his eye. They ignited a spark of hope that had long been buried under exhaustion, isolation, and the relentless cold. For days, he had moved mechanically, driven only by the instinct to survive. Every step had been a struggle against fatigue, hunger, and the unforgiving terrain, and each night had brought a crushing sense of solitude that threatened to break his spirit. But the discovery of the footprints changed everything. They were proof that life existed beyond his own struggle, that movement was possible, and that the world was not entirely indifferent to his presence. In a place where despair had become familiar, the footprints became a lifeline, a reason to believe that he could continue. The significance of the footprints was both practical and emotional. On a purely practical level, they suggested a path forward, an implicit guide through the treacherous snow and ice. Even if he did not know who had made them or where they led, the fact that someone or something had passed this way before indicated that the terrain was navigable. The mental reassurance that he was not alone, that survival was possible in this frozen expanse, was a crucial boost to his willpower. On an emotional level, the footprints symbolized hope in its purest form, a reminder that even the smallest signs can change the course of a desperate journey. They were a message written in snow, a whisper that said, "Keep going. You are not defeated." Hope, fragile and easily extinguished in extreme conditions, began to grow stronger with each step he took toward the trail. The physical strain of climbing, the aching muscles, and the biting cold were still present, but they no longer dictated his mindset. Instead, the footprints became the focus of his energy, giving him purpose beyond mere survival. Where before he had been consumed by the monotony and despair of the mountain, now he felt a renewed drive. Every glance at the tracks reminded him that perseverance could yield results, that even in the most barren and unforgiving places, signs of life or possibility could appear when least expected. This spark of hope reshaped his perception of the mountain. What had seemed an endless wasteland of snow and ice now held meaning, a silent guide that offered direction and motivation. The tracks represented more than movement. They were evidence that survival was not an abstract concept, but a tangible reality. They reminded him that life leaves traces, that endurance has value, and that the mind and spirit are as crucial to survival as the body. Even amidst extreme fatigue, the sense that he was following a path, however uncertain, restored a sense of agency and control. By the time he pushed on, he carried the hope inspired by the footprints like a shield against despair. The mountain remained harsh, the snow still biting, and the climb still exhausting, but the discovery had renewed his determination. The footprints were a lifeline, a reason to keep moving, and proof that hope, even in the smallest forms, can sustain a person through seemingly insurmountable challenges. They show that survival is not only about strength or skill, but about noticing the signs, embracing the hope they inspire, and letting that hope guide every step forward. The discovery of the footprints awakened a curiosity that had long lain dormant beneath the crushing weight of exhaustion, fear, and isolation. For days, his mind had been consumed by the mechanics of survival, moving forward, conserving energy, managing hunger, and avoiding the deadly pitfalls of the mountain. Every action had been dictated by necessity rather than purpose, and the vast whiteness around him had become a monotonous prison of endless snow and ice. But the footprints changed everything. They were a mystery, a puzzle that demanded attention, and with that curiosity came a renewed sense of determination. The question of who, or what, had left the tracks sparked a mental engagement that reinvigorated his spirit and redirected his energy from mere survival to active pursuit. As he examined the prints, his imagination began to fill in the gaps. Were they left by another climber who had survived the harsh terrain? Perhaps someone who had come before him and learned the secrets of the mountain, leaving behind evidence of their passage. Or were they animal tracks, a reminder of the resilience of life even in the harshest environments? Each possibility fueled his mind, compelling him to think, analyze, and anticipate. The act of wondering about the footprints shifted his focus away from fatigue and fear, replacing it with engagement and purpose. The mountain, which had seemed mercilessly indifferent, now offered a narrative, a thread of connection to the world beyond his own struggle. Curiosity became a tool for survival. The tracks offered more than hope. They gave him something to follow, a tangible clue that demanded interpretation and action. Every detail, the depth of the prints, their spacing, and their direction, became significant. He found himself calculating stride length, examining the slope, and considering the possible origin of each mark. The process of analysis engaged his mind, sharpening focus dulled by days of exhaustion, and provided a distraction from the gnawing ache of hunger and the relentless cold. By channeling his attention into observation and deduction, he transformed idle hope into actionable strategy. The mental shift sparked by curiosity also renewed his motivation. Where before he had moved out of necessity, now he moved with purpose. The footprints suggested a path, a continuation, and perhaps even the promise of encounter or guidance. Each step he took toward the tracks was now imbued with meaning. He was not merely surviving the mountain's cruelty, but actively engaging with it, seeking out the story hinted at in the snow. The interplay between curiosity and survival turned fatigue from a paralyzing force into a manageable challenge as his mind found energy in the pursuit of understanding. By the end of the day, he realized that the footprints had given him more than direction. They had rekindled a sense of agency. Survival was no longer a passive endurance of the mountain's harshness, but an active quest to interpret signs, make decisions, and engage with the environment. Curiosity had restored purpose to his journey, proving that even in the most desolate conditions, the mind can find pathways to hope, and that the pursuit of understanding can transform despair into determination, guiding both mind and body forward through the harshest trials. The footprints in the snow did more than spark curiosity. They renewed his focus and sharpened his mental resolve, transforming exhaustion into purposeful movement. For days, fatigue had clouded his judgment, leaving him moving almost automatically, reacting to immediate physical needs rather than thinking strategically. His mind had grown weary from the constant strain of survival, weighed down by hunger, cold, and the relentless monotony of snow and ice. But the sign in the snow changed the equation. Suddenly, there was something to aim for, something tangible that demanded his attention and analysis. Every step became deliberate, calculated, and driven by the need to follow the trail, rather than simply endure the climb. The footprints provided structure to a previously aimless struggle. Up until that moment, the mountain had dictated the rhythm. The pace was set by exhaustion, the timing dictated by survival. But with the discovery of the tracks, he regained a sense of control. He could plan each movement with intent, decide when to rest, when to push forward, and how to navigate the treacherous terrain with maximum efficiency. The mind, which had been dulled by days of physical strain, now became his greatest asset. He studied the direction, spacing, and depth of the prints, using them to anticipate the terrain ahead and gauge the challenges that might await. Each observation reinforced a sense of agency, reminding him that while the mountain was formidable, it did not have to be insurmountable. The renewed focus also allowed him to conserve energy in smarter ways. Fatigue had once dictated a slow, inefficient rhythm, sapping his strength before it could be used effectively. Now, guided by the footprints, each step was intentional. He adjusted his pace to maintain endurance, calculated movements to minimize unnecessary strain, and used the presence of the tracks as a psychological anchor to remain steady despite the cold and pain. The mental engagement provided by following the footprints counteracted the demoralizing effects of exhaustion, transforming physical survival into a coordinated, purposeful effort. Beyond practical benefits, the footprints brought emotional clarity. For days, despair had seeped into every thought, amplified by isolation and hardship. But now, the mysterious signs reminded him that perseverance could yield insight, that the environment itself could provide hints, and that life or guidance might exist beyond his immediate struggle. This clarity bolstered his confidence, reinforcing the idea that each step, each decision, and each observation mattered. The focus derived from the tracks allowed him to filter out distraction and fear, replacing them with actionable attention and strategic thought. By the end of the day, he had discovered a critical truth: mental focus could transform physical endurance. The footprints were more than mere impressions. They were catalysts for renewed concentration, discipline, and determination. Following them reminded him that survival was not just about strength or stamina, but about the ability to direct attention, engage with challenges intelligently, and maintain a sense of purpose even under extreme duress. The mountain remained harsh and unyielding, but the footprints had shown him that clarity of mind could make the impossible feel attainable, and that the mind, once engaged, could guide a weary body toward continued survival. The small, mysterious footprints in the snow carried a lesson far greater than their size suggested. Even the tiniest signs can ignite hope and transform a dire situation. For days, he had battled exhaustion, isolation, and the unrelenting cold, feeling as though the mountain had erased all traces of life and possibility. The landscape seemed endless and indifferent, offering no guidance, no encouragement, and no respite. Then these subtle marks appeared, simple yet profound, reminding him that survival and progress often depend on noticing the smallest details. A single clue, a tiny imprint, had the power to shift perspective and alter the course of a journey that had felt hopeless. The footprints served as a symbol of possibility. They suggested that someone, or something, had navigated this harsh terrain before him, proving that it could be done. This realization was transformative. Until that moment, he had struggled almost blindly, driven purely by instinct and necessity, often questioning whether he could continue. The discovery changed his mindset. It was no longer just about surviving the mountain, but about following a trail, seeking meaning, and trusting that even the faintest signs could lead to safety, guidance, or understanding. The footprints, small and almost overlooked, became proof that attention and awareness could yield direction and reassurance in even the most unforgiving environments. Noticing the tracks required mental engagement, a focus that had been dulled by fatigue and despair. For the first time in days, his mind sharpened, analyzing the pattern of the prints, the spacing, and the direction. Each detail became important, a piece of a puzzle that could provide insight into the terrain ahead. This renewed engagement energized him psychologically, offsetting the physical strain that had made movement feel nearly impossible. By observing and interpreting the footprints, he regained a sense of agency, transforming his role from passive survivor to active participant in his own journey. The smallest sign had become a catalyst for renewed determination, a reminder that survival is as much about awareness and perception as it is about strength and endurance. Emotionally, the footprints carried weight far beyond their physical presence. In an environment where loneliness and despair had taken root, they reminded him that he was not entirely alone, that traces of life could exist even in isolation. This realization ignited hope, a fragile but powerful force that allowed him to push his exhausted body forward. The human spirit, he understood, could cling to even the faintest encouragement, and recognizing such signs could make the difference between giving up and finding the strength to continue. The footprints demonstrated that hope often comes in subtle, unexpected forms, and that noticing it requires mindfulness and attention. By the end of the day, he internalized a vital lesson. Survival is influenced as much by perception and awareness as by physical endurance. The footprints had shown that even tiny, almost imperceptible details could provide purpose, motivation, and direction. In the harshest conditions, hope can be hidden in the smallest signs, and resilience is maintained by the ability to recognize and act on them. The mountain remained relentless, but the footprints had illuminated a path forward, proving that perseverance often begins with noticing the smallest clues, embracing the hope they offer, and letting them guide the mind and body through seemingly insurmountable challenges.